We're ready when you are. We're live.
Yeah, boom. We're back. Another episode. I'm laughing because of what you did with Nicola. I'm
missed
worried
the
about
intro
it.
as usual. Go on.
So we got Mark Casci from the Yorkshire Post.
Yep.
Got it right.
Off to a flyer.
Yeah, we're off. We're off. So, Mark, people don't know you. People don't follow your page too much. Do you want to give people a background of what you're doing right now?
Okay, so for the last 3 years and 5 months, I've been the business editor of the Yorkshire Post. I've worked at the YP since July of 2008. I've had a few jobs at that newspaper. Joined, believe it or not, as rural affairs correspondent. You could probably tell from my accent, I'm from the northeast. I'm from Middlesbrough, which is one of the most urban and industrial places in the world.
Yeah.
Hadn't really been... I knew absolutely nothing about farming or the countryside or anything like that, but the job had come up at the Yorkshire Post and it was a specialist correspondent job, so I thought, do you know what, I can learn. I doubled down on learning all this stuff, and I was lucky enough to get the job, and that was my foot in the door to a paper that I always wanted to work at since I was pretty young. Did that for a few years. I ended up going onto without getting too technical, I went onto the news desk, so that's like commissioning and editing stories as opposed to writing them. Ended up running the news department for 3 years, and then I was missing writing. I was missing being out talking to people and interviewing people and meeting interesting people, which is kind of the whole point of being a journalist in the first place. And I moved over to being business editor, which is now the job I do, and I'm really lucky to have it. It's great. I love every minute of it.
Nice. How long have you been in the Post now?
So in the current position I'm in, I started in May 2016. So in a lot of ways you can say I'm to blame for a lot of things, because things started to go pretty wrong in the world around about that time. Things started to get really crazy. It's a good time for journalists, I guess, but maybe not a good time for the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's a funny one, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
How is it you benefit from kind of negativity, or, not benefit from negativity, that's awful, but you know what I'm getting at.
I know
What
exactly
people
what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And it's a side of the profession I don't like at all, and I'll be very frank about it. I much prefer writing about good things happening to bad things.
Sure.
And it's the same if you go and see your friend in a coffee shop or a pub or what have you, or you meet him down the gym, and he says, "Oh, I've just met this fantastic new girl," or my son's just got into this amazing university, or I've just got this great new job. You're going to be much more interested in hearing about that and much happier and positive about that experience than you are if, my missus has just left me, or I've lost my job or anything like that.
Yeah.
You'll sympathise, of course, but you're much more interested in positive stuff. So I'm definitely in that. But yeah, unfortunately, things are pretty insane at the moment. And it makes what we were reporting on 4 or 5 years ago look pretty mundane and boring. But it wasn't at the time, of course.
No, of course. So when you go back to when you applied for the position in the first case, and you kind of applied with, I'm not saying no experience, but no knowledge in the
No
field.
knowledge, yeah. I've been a journalist by that point for like 5 years, 5 years full time.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question.
I'm used to doing it the other way around, so sorry if I...
It's fine. What I was going to get at is, it's kind of a funny question, would be, how did you come about selling yourself in that interview? I'm a journalist, but I don't know anything about farming.
Well, I mean, I'll be absolutely clear, I didn't say that at all to the editor when I went in for the job. I made out I knew loads, and I gemmed up on a few stats and stuff like that, which is always helpful. Numbers always make you look like you know what you're talking about, no matter what it is. But the big thing I went for, actually, and as someone who's interviewed people to employ as a journalist quite a few times since then, you want to come across as someone who's just got nothing but unbridled enthusiasm for getting this job. So that was the main thing that I brought across. I'm very, very clear that I've wanted to work at this newspaper since I was at primary school, and this is my opportunity to do it, and I'll be coming in here 100% as hard as I can doing that. And I was able to sort of point to stuff I'd done earlier in my career where I'd had to report on stuff that I'd not had any prior experience of, and frankly that's kind of part of the job. You often have to get quite knowledgeable about complicated stuff at very short notice and then forget it all instantly after the interview's finished. So yeah, I think probably enthusiasm was what I brought to the table more than sort of an encyclopedic knowledge of how the Common Agricultural Policy works, or carbon capture, or all these sort of technical things that I ended up having to write about. But don't get me wrong, I loved doing that job. It was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed it. yeah, it was great.
Was the goal always to be reporting on business though?
No, not at all. So my kind of route into journalism that I always intended to pursue was I'm an absolutely colossal music fan and have been basically since I can remember, and it was always music journalism that I wanted to do. When I actually started to study journalism and learn the craft, I became a lot less interested in doing music journalism and became a lot more interested in sort of politics and economics and current affairs. So that kind of initial entry point very, very quickly shifted. So yeah, always that kind of sort of serious, important and influential side of things was what I wanted to do. The sort of action and reality of talking to sort of, you know, big company bosses or very senior politicians or very influential and knowledgeable people is a real buzz. Being able to, you know, even hold your own in a conversation with them is great, let alone sort of be able to pick them up on points. And there's a lot of work has to go into that. Because, you know, I wouldn't claim to be, and I'm definitely not an expert on economics or on business or anything like that. I'm a journalist, I'm not a business person. But sort of reporting on that community is great. And the great thing about the job I've got is that I can campaign and champion the area and what it needs and what it's good at. Going back to that positive versus negative thing, you know, I'm a big believer that you shouldn't point out a problem without at least having something approaching a solution that you can bring to the table. So yeah, that was a big kind of driver for me, was wanting to get into that day-to-day working environment where, and you know what, man, it doesn't have to be company bosses. Talking to entrepreneurs, we've got great startups, is awesome as well, because that is so inspiring. Someone who's just started a business with this great idea that really somebody should have thought of before because it's so good, but they haven't. This person has, and they're pursuing it, and watching them grow is tremendous, absolutely fantastic.
How much is your job about building rapport with people? Is there people that you'll constantly go to interview, to maybe get their perspective on the way things are going, or reports or that sort of stuff? Is it how?
That was kind of the first step that I needed to do, and this was totally self-evident when I started the job. I'd been office-based at that point for like best part of 5 years. So I was like, right, I don't have a network of contacts really anymore. I did have some from previous jobs, so I had to sort of re-establish those relationships. But I literally spent 6 months to a year spending maybe 2 or 3, maybe not much, maybe a couple of days a week, like literally driving around all of Yorkshire or going down to London to meet people and sort of establish, as you say, a rapport. So, you know, if I need to know something on or off the record, I can go to them. So that meant, you know, spending a lot of time in Sheffield, Hull, York, Bradford, North Yorkshire, a bit down in the city of London, a lot in Leeds, which is sort of the economic capital of the area. And yeah, the big thing that I guess that regional journalism has as a colossal strength is that I'm not really in a position where I can screw someone over by publishing something that they've told me in confidence, because that's that relationship finished forever, and I'm still here the next day. I'm probably going to see them in the street in the next few weeks, so I can't go around screwing people over. I don't have that luxury that, say, somebody on one of the tabloids does, where I've done the story, that's fine, I'll do something else next week. So yeah, that position is, I get told stuff all the time that it's a privilege to learn. Like, I mean, I knew that Channel 4 was coming to Leeds about a day before it got announced. You've just got to sit on your hands. The chief footy writer at work, Richard Sutcliffe, he's just left, and he knew what the football team that Hull were going to put out in the FA Cup final about a week before the game was played, and didn't tell anyone. It's just the way you've got to operate. You've got to be a trustworthy. It's not really a word that you apply to journalists particularly regularly, but you've got to be trusted, because otherwise you just don't have a network.
Yeah, do you know, it's a good point to say, because when you say journalist to someone, like he just has that it would have that negative connotation always.
Used car salesman, kind of in that bracket.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, here's the facts, but here's the headline, and we don't care as long as you pick up the paper or click the link.
Yeah,
you know, we're good to go. That's why I was really, really excited to get you in. Was to get your view on the difference between regional and national. And it seems like regional, actually, because it's more focused, it kind of cares more about the area.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Well, I mean, the Yorkshire Post is a national stroke regional paper, so we've got, you know, people in the City of London, people in Westminster, and we'll just as likely splash on something that's happened in Scotland or the presidential election or whatever as we will as something that's happened in regional. But it's from a very unabashedly partisan perspective. We're pro Yorkshire 100%, pro the North. So we'll always come at it from that angle all the time. So in that sense, yeah, you're part of the community. You know, you're part of day-to-day life. And then if you take that down to sort of the more regionalised titles that don't just cover all of Yorkshire, which has got more than 5 million people, bigger than the population of Scotland, is the biggest geographic county in the country. If you go to, like, you know, papers that cover, say, Bradford, like the TNA, where I started my career, or the Press in York, where I worked for a while, you're part of the sort of day-to-day fabric. You're an institution that sort of sits alongside, like, the you know, the council and the sports teams and stuff like that. And if you're not campaigning for that place to be better and more prosperous and more fair, then there's no point in you existing, really. You know, and especially nowadays, you know, you can find out the football results by just going on your phone and what have you. You need to have that something special that you can't get elsewhere, and that in-depth local knowledge.
No, that's right. That's right. I think it's always interesting to understand how it works, in terms of how does news come to you? How do you get stories? Like, how does that even work?
Okay, a lot of different avenues. For a long time in my career, my main way of getting stories was investigative journalism, which is a very labour-intensive and a very often quite a boring process. What do I mean by that? I mean, you're submitting a Freedom of Information Act request and you get back like 90 pages worth of information, and you have to go through that, and then you realise, you know what, this isn't actually what I wanted. I needed the previous year to compare. Then you go through all of this, you spend weeks and weeks working on it on and off, and eventually you come up with something. A big one for me is the network of contacts I've got. I've been very lucky that I've got a lot of people who I really trust who can point me in the right direction. You haven't heard this from me, but you might want to check this out. And then you get the sort of what we call diary stories. So that's the day-to-day stuff. So, like, for example, today there's been a big event in Rotherham that the Prime Minister's been speaking at. It's been a conference for the North. It's been basically trying to sort of focus on what the North's economy and its people need. And Boris Johnson's been there today. So that's a diary story. So you just go there and kind of cover what happens. And then you'll get sent stuff proactively by businesses or councils or sports teams or whoever it may be, saying this is what happens. We're going to be signing this player this weekend. This is who our new manager is. We've reported a loss this year, and this is why. We're expanding overseas, and here's where we're going. And they'll tell you about it, and then you ask questions to kind of flesh it out. So it's not just them kind of getting their story out there without it being scrutinised. So quite a lot of ways. And then there's the stuff that just happens day to day. The crime stuff, accidents, things that are worse than that. Even, you know, the really grim stuff like terror attacks where you just weren't expecting it, of course, and you have to drop everything and focus all of your resource and attention on that. So no day is one of the really good things about the job. I mean, it's not all, you know, sweetness and light. No job is. You know, the hours can be quite challenging, and sometimes you'll bark up the wrong tree for ages and not really get anywhere with something you thought was going to be great. But no day is the same. I don't do the same thing each day. I'm out of the office a great deal. I get to travel around quite a lot and meet interesting people. So it's in that sense, it's a very rewarding and fulfilling and exciting job.
Yeah. So what was it exactly? Was it the freedom that? What was it about journalism that made you become a journalist?
It's a tough one to make. I just always really had a kind of a really high regard for it as a profession. You know, when I was really, really little, like all little boys, or most little boys, I was obsessed with football. So I used to love reading football magazines and reading the match reports, and then sort of getting heavily into music in teenage years, which everyone does. You know, there wasn't much music press then. There was like maybe a couple of newspapers and 5 magazines, and I'd buy them all and read them all cover to cover and keep them all stacked up in a corner and do my mum's head in because I wouldn't throw them away. You know, why have you got this NME from 1994? Well, you never know, I might need it. And then of course when I moved they all got chucked out. I think just kind of being in that position where you get to witness things firsthand is really cool. Something I've always enjoyed and been kind of drawn into. And also trying to help people. You know, just even when I started at the TNA as a trainee, you'd be writing stories that only really affected one person. You know, some poor granny who's getting screwed over by the gas company because they've sent her this bill and she doesn't deserve it, and you do the story about it and they repay the money. That's a nice feeling. So all of those kind of sort of little things, and then the big things like getting to interview the Prime Minister is not something most people get to do. No. Which I did last month actually in Armley Prison, which was in itself a an experience. Yeah, we weren't like both visiting mates at the same time and just kind of ran into each other.
You got 10 minutes.
Yeah, he was announcing a load of new cash for prison security. So yeah, I went in there. I counted. I went through 14 locked doors before we got into the room to interview him. Had to wait for a long time for him to come round, obviously. But the biggest challenge of that, to be honest with you, is you couldn't take your mobile phone in, which no one can take into a prison. And I know how to write shorthand in theory. In theory, I can write shorthand at 100 words per minute, but I passed that exam when I was 23. Long time ago. So yeah, there's just no way I was going to trust that skill to get me through an interview with the most, powerful politician in the country. So I had to find a dictaphone, which are a bit like, typewriters now. There's not a lot of them around, but a colleague had one in a drawer, managed to charge it up and run up there and do it.
Yeah. So how was that? You might as well get on to it. You mentioned it, like, what was it like?
My time in prison or interviewing the Boris Johnson?
Nah, the prison thing, we've interviewed people that have been in prison, so we've covered that on the podcast. So what's it like to meet the Prime Minister, and what's it like to hold a conversation with someone of such power?
So do you know what? It actually was a good learning experience for me, because I really kind of saw where his popularity comes from. He's very energetic, he's very charismatic, and he actually, more than anything, he answers your question and talks to you normally, whereas, and I'm not putting politicians down for this, I know they do this for a reason, but it's very frustrating for someone like me in my job, that you'll ask them a question and I can almost tell you what the answer was going to be and how they were going to phrase it when it comes back. And I've had that, I interviewed Philip Hammond, the former Chancellor, a couple of years ago, and I remember you only get like 5 minutes, so like you've got to be really, really. It's not like this, which one of the things I really like about podcasts is you can actually get into depth of things.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, you've got to be super focused, and if they start prattling on about, we spent all this money, you've got to interrupt them, which I don't like doing. I'm quite a polite person, but with Boris, he really was kind of engaging with you and stuff like that. And when we finished doing the interview, he was talking about, have you had a look around the prison? And I said, no, I've been sat in the chapel for 4 hours waiting for you to stop prattling around. And he was laughing and joking and stuff like that. So I can see why he kind of has a popularity with the man in the street or the woman in the street that a lot of politicians don't, because he's not particularly robotic. Well, he's not robotic at all. I would imagine he's kind of talks to I don't imagine he goes to the shops much anymore, but when he did go to the shops, he kind of talked to the person behind the counter the same way that he talked to most people. So I think he has that quality, which is kind of lacking in a lot of politicians. Is probably why a lot of people like him.
Yeah, it's probably the worst time not in history, but in a long time to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, and
so having those characteristics it's kind of wasted right now.
Well, I didn't do this, a colleague did, but he said, what's the thing that surprised you most about being Prime Minister? And he said, I was surprised at how much I'm enjoying it. Which, if you think about it, that's a really weird answer to give to a question about a new job you got, because for most people you go for a job because you think it's going to be great and you're going to enjoy it. I think a lot of politicians, in fact most politicians in my experience, they go into it because they genuinely want to do some good. A lot of them will get into it because they want to be powerful and they want to jet around the world and all the rest of it. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I don't think most people would turn that opportunity down if it came their way. But I think a lot of, particularly constituency MPs, the reason that they got elected and try to get elected is because they like kind of representing their constituency and the people that live in that area. And I think especially if you're from that area, which in the sort of Leeds and Yorkshire area, there's a lot of politicians that are kind of born and bred in that area. And the biggest say they can get is in the House of Commons, and they do things that way. So in answering your question, he said he was enjoying the job, and you're right, going into that number 10 Downing Street at this time is probably not going to be a lot of fun. A lot of difficulties, a lot of opposition, and let's be clear, a lot of people don't like him. I don't know, for me, there's just this huge separation in this country at the minute, and I find it horrible. I don't really see what he's doing to sort of bring everyone together, really.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's 50% and pretty much 50% both wanted totally different outcomes. You can only please half. Pick a side, really.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I'm one of my biggest strengths and weaknesses at the same time is I'm a very optimistic person, and with that, I guess, comes a bit of naivety. But I do think that a real kind of effective leader should have some sort of interest in trying to come up with a solution that you're never going to please everybody. No one walks away from a negotiation with everything they wanted, but something that's acceptable to everyone. But at the moment, we've just, as you say, complete split, zero compromise, no agreement whatsoever, and it's not a good time for the country, and I don't like it at all.
No. So I'm 28.
Right.
I don't know when the referendum was.
2016.
All right. So it's 3 years. So.
5 years.
So I was like 25. That was the first ever, I remember it clearly, the first ever decision of any vote, election, in a political sphere that actually pissed me off.
Okay.
Ever. And I think that speaks for everyone our age. At that time, it was kind of more frustration, and I think it's kind of disconnected people our age from politics more than ever.
Right.
I think a lot of younger people don't even understand
Yeah.
what Brexit is, why it happened, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you vote? If you don't mind asking.
Both voted.
Yeah,
I voted.
yes.
Good.
I voted, yeah.
So, look, I mean, young people not voting is not a new thing. And in fact, at the last election, the young vote actually went up quite a lot. I think 57% of people under 20 voted in the last election, which is much higher than normal. I don't know what it was in the referendum, but it's you look at the statistics. The older you got, the more likely you were to vote for Brexit. The younger you are, the more likely you are to vote for left-wing parties. Mm-hmm. The older you get, you're more likely to veer to the right. There's a lot of criticism, isn't there, of young people, and I've never ever felt that this was accurate or fair. That they don't vote or they don't care, and that they'll spout off on social media, but they won't actually get to the ballot box. I don't know a huge amount of young people. I don't think of myself as old, but I don't think of myself as young anymore. I'm 40 next year, but my experience of young people is they're very switched on and engaged and really interested and have a good knowledge of what's going on. And that's kind of uniform, people in my family or people that I come across and work, they really kind of have a very strong view on what's happening. But the reality is, the younger you are, the less likely you are to vote. You can blame that on young people saying you're not involving yourself in this chance to have a say on the future of your country and on what happens. But there's also something that's putting them off from doing it. It can't all just be because they're lazy. It has to be for other reasons as well. And I think it's kind of a question of both sides failing each other, if you know what I mean. That people feel, as you say, disconnected from politics. This doesn't affect me. And the other side of it as well is that if we're going to have a general election not too distant future, and many more people will vote in that general election than they will do when there's the council election. And what happens with the council election is actually much more important than the general election in terms of your day-to-day life. Your hospitals and your schools and your roads and your bin collection, stuff that actually happens on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't happen in Westminster, it happens here. So I don't know what the answer is. There's countries in this world that have compulsory voting where you have to do it by law. You don't have to vote for a party, but you can go in there and vote for nobody. Against all is often the option. I don't want to force people to vote, but is there something we can do that makes it more of a compulsion to get them to do it? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. The council thing's actually a great point because, as you said it, I was like, yeah, shit, I wouldn't vote in the council election.
Hardly
if
anyone
they
does.
called a general election, I would make sure I can vote.
Yeah. And also as well, council elections don't really get much media coverage. I mean, even for us, we don't do a huge. It's difficult for the Yorkshire Post because there's I should know this off the top of my head, but there's more than 20 councils in Yorkshire. Covering all of them in detail is just not going to happen because, if you live in Thirsk or Ripon or Scarborough, you're not going to care what's happening in Rotherham or Doncaster. Yeah. But yeah, I do genuinely believe that. I think most of the sort of meaningful politics happens at local level, and that's a big passion of mine, something we're campaigning on a lot. We're a very, very centralised country. It's starting to change now, and I actually think a lot of the problems and divisions we've got at the moment are that a lot of people around the world, not in the country rather, not just in the north of England, but in sort of the southwest, they feel kind of they've been left behind. And why do they feel that they got left behind? Because everything happens in Westminster. Everything happens in Westminster. Scotland has its own devolved government with some pretty considerable powers. Scotland's, very. I was born in Scotland. My family all live up there. Wales has got its devolved government. Northern Ireland has. We've just started electing mayors in Britain, but they've got very limited powers. I think if Britain was a federal country, which is a very technical and boring way of looking at it, but if you think about the United States, there's governors and mayors and state legislators who control everything very locally. So you kind of really feel like you've got a handle and a control and a say in what's happening in your area. And in Britain, I don't think we're doing that very effectively. London is far too powerful. And it doesn't have to be this way. It's not like that in Germany. Germany has much more local control, and same with France and other parts in Europe. I do think that's a say. I think we're the North. I'm a very passionate, proud Northerner. I could live anywhere I want, I guess, and I choose to live in the North because I think it's a fantastic place to live. But it's really underserved. You look at the transport network in the North and compare it to down south, it's night and day. Catching a train anywhere in the north of England is absolutely bloody horrendous.
And awful diesel trains that just
the paces.
Hot as fuck. It's horrible. I remember I lived in Halifax for a bit, and in the summer it was just like sweatbox.
Yeah, and you go to.
It's still the same now.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah, nothing's changed.
Ago.
Still the same.
Crazy.
So yeah, transport, but educational outcomes in the north of England aren't as good. Some of the hospital trusts underperform in comparison to the south. Why is that? Well, and they'll say, London is the economic driver of the country because that's where the financial centre is and that's where a lot of the companies are headquartered. A lot of FTSE 100 companies have got their HQ in Yorkshire or in the north. There's a huge amount of potential and it's just under-realised, and a big part of that is you can't get around. If you wanted to go and work in Manchester, it's probably not going to happen for most people. Some people will brave the M62 for an hour and a half, 2 hours each way. Most people are just not going to do it. And get this, the distance between Manchester and Leeds is shorter than the Central Line on the London Underground.
That's crazy.
It's hardly anything. I can't remember what it is miles-wise, but I like cycling, and it's a distance that I could cycle.
Yeah,
I could cover it on my own steam, and yet it takes me more than an hour on the train to get there. So if you're a business, doesn't matter if you're a huge business, if you're a small business and you want to get the best staff, you're having to fish in a small pond because you can't really get around. Whereas, people I know in London, they live 40 miles away from London, but they can get in no bother because the transport network is really good. So if you take away or you limit people's ability to travel for work, then you limit their ability to grow a business or get involved in a business, which is not great.
No, it's a great point. So, you're talking about jobs, and there's a lot of bits and pieces in the news now about automation, all that sort of stuff is it's gonna take everyone's jobs and this sort of stuff. And one of the things I wanted to touch on was our audience is kind of in the it is in that millennial area, right? How should people look at their futures in terms of? I'm not asking you to go learn how to write code now, tell people to do all that stuff, but what can people do to kind of preempt maybe what's going to
learning to code is a good step.
Yeah, it probably is.
They should be teaching it at schools.
Yeah.
I've got a daughter who's 5.5. I'm pretty sure by the time she goes to secondary school she'll be learning how to code.
Yeah.
But moreover than that, so look, automation, it's not a new thing, is it? The Industrial Revolution got rid of people making fabric in cottages and cottage industries, and everyone went into factories. What's interesting about this, which is called the fourth industrial revolution, which is automation and AI. Previous industrial revolutions, they mainly impacted on poorer people. This is going to impact on everyone. So lawyers are going to lose their jobs because of AI and automation. Big part of a lawyer's job or an accountant's job is either searching through case law or scanning contracts or looking at accounts. Pretty soon, machines will be able to do that much quicker and more effectively because
and they don't have a personality.
They don't have a personality, and humans make mistakes.
Emotion,
Doctors who are looking at medical scans, a machine would be able to do that better.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, they'll be able to do it quicker as well, and you don't have to pay them or pay their pensions or anything like that. So it's not just going to be people at the lower end of the economic spectrum that are going to be in trouble for this. So, but equally with that, there's going to be opportunity to be involved in that programming side of things. We've always managed to create jobs as a country, or as a worldwide economy. We've always been able to find new ways of making money. I guess, and I'm actually seeing signs that this is happening. I think the younger you are now, the more predisposed or interested you are in running your own business comes along. Which, when I was a kid, that wasn't the case at all. When I was born in 1980, and the sort of objective you were given at school was get good grades, go to university, get a good job that's well paid. I think what's going to probably start to see is that a lot of kids will want to go out there and do it for themselves. Your generation, the millennial generation, for which I'm just outside the millennials, I'm not quite. I'm Generation X, which sounds cool.
Cool.
You're a very optimistic, by and large, generation. You know, you see positives in more situations. You're much more likely to change jobs than my generation and previous ones were. You know, like, for example, my dad worked for the same company from when he went to work for them until he retired. My mum taught at the same school until she retired. Younger people will move around a lot more. They want a lot more out of the world of work. They will not think anything of like, well, you're gonna on your CV, you're only going to have been there for a year. So what? I wanted to go and do something else. More likely to change careers, and they're more kind of optimistic about what innovation will bring. And you know, you've got good role models from your generation already. You know, people like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg becoming billionaires before they're 30. Not everyone's going to do that, of course, but that was unheard of until now. You know, by the time you became really wealthy, you were much older than that. So there's good role models in that sense. I think, being more adaptable to change. And listen as well, when you guys started working was probably not long after the last economic crash. So that was a pretty uncertain period to be starting work. So you were almost conditioned to change very early. You're going to have to get used to that. Anyone that's young that's listening to this, you know, I mean, I'll put it this way. My daughter's 5.5. When she starts work, there's a very, very good chance, probably better than not, that the job that she ends up doing doesn't exist right now. Definitely didn't exist when I was a kid. You know, there wasn't new industries really springing up that much. It was more a case of industries disappearing and shrinking. There'd be a lot more opportunity to do things your own way. I think there'll be a lot more people that are self-employed. And then the other question you've got to ask yourself is and we're already seeing people talking about this very seriously, the universal basic income idea, which would have been laughed out of town not that long ago. But there's a guy running for president in the United States now. He's running to be the Democratic candidate. He's a tech entrepreneur. He's called Andrew Yang. And he's not calling it universal basic income because it's America. They have to call it something. So he's calling it the freedom dividend. But you get $1,000 a month if he gets elected president. Everyone. If you got a job, you get $1,000 a month. If you're unemployed, you get $1,000 a month. And what you do with that is your business. But if you think about that kind of model, and I'm not convinced it would work yet, but it's something we need to start taking into consideration. So, I mean, look, check this out. With driverless cars, that kind of technology, how many jobs is that going to get rid of? Truck drivers, taxi drivers, that's a big sector of employment in this country. Logistics, yeah, huge. I mean, the trucks, there'll be drones delivering stuff. That's a lot of jobs that are going to go straight away. And if you've been a truck driver, you're 55 years old, you've been a truck driver since you were 18 years old, realistically, you're not going to be able to go and get another job in that sector if there's no truck driving anymore. Because the boss of the logistics company's looking at it and thinking, okay, that truck doesn't need to stop for him to go to the bathroom or go to sleep. I don't need to pay him a salary or pay his pension contribution. That truck can drive around basically 24 hours a day unless it needs to refuel. Same with taxis. What about with the car industry? How interested are people going to be in cars going forward if you're not really driving it? If it's an automatic car, do you even need to have a car? What's the point in having one if you don't drive it? You just have an app on your phone, you press it, it comes to your house at a predetermined time every morning, takes you to work, goes and parks somewhere, picks you up at the end of the day. I'm not talking, science fiction. It's not science fiction. It's more likely and realistic than it ever has been. But society will always find a way of creating work for people, but it's going to be very different to the world that we've had until recently. And also the thing I'd say is that what was previously considered to be a really good job, a good profession, something that you would want your kids to have, that's going to probably start to change, I think. I don't think there'll be, I want my son or daughter to be a doctor or a lawyer. You'll still have that, but I'm hoping that I want my son or daughter to do their own thing, to come up with something new, to be an innovator and find a way of monetizing that.
Yeah, anything that really involves interpretation of any information, it'll be redundant.
Yeah.
Really, truthfully, honestly. Even like I even thought about it because we both work in sales, right?
Right.
And I was like, they won't even need salespeople because company Y that you own, and I work for company X, your algorithm will just be out there looking at all the data constantly. Our algorithm is trying to push out our product or whatever. They'll both come to a decision that my product or your product is the best of the two. For this, and this, it'll pay itself back in 10 years. We don't need to sit in front of someone, buy them a fucking coffee, and say, oh, I really like your cat, show me, where did you go on holiday? It's not going to matter anymore. Like that, it's actually going to be that, it's going to be that crazy. And I just think schools now, it's like a memory test. When you're at school, it's like, how much can you remember? How much can you put down? And how
it's
well
to pass
is
an exam, wasn't
how
it?
well is it written? Yeah. So now I think we mentioned it to Neil from King Kobe. He was talking about his son. Like, he doesn't care. All right, paraphrasing. He doesn't care what his son does at school, but he wants him to be a good person and have good emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So how important do you think changing schooling could be?
Very much so. So
or
I mean,
even just the country. So it kind of links, like, jobs are going to go away.
Yeah.
People are divided. There's clearly a connection there.
I mean, I've literally got skin in the game because I've got a daughter that started school last year. She's in year 1 now. But I mean, I'll come into that in a second, but at school, she is learning stuff, which fills me with a huge amount of optimism. Like, they teach them to do meditation and they teach them to do yoga.
Oh, really? Wow. Nice.
I know. I mean, how awesome is that?
That's cool.
Right. I remember when she came home from school and told me she'd do that, she was showing me the sort of yoga poses and stuff like that. And I love doing yoga as well. So I was just like, you're actually doing that quite well. That's better than how I do it. The meditation thing, I don't think she's quite cracked yet. I said, show me what you do, and she went, like that. Which, I mean, I don't meditate, but I'm guessing that's not what you're meant to do. But yeah, serious point. Look, education's got to move beyond the accumulation of knowledge. You're definitely right. It was to learn facts and to pass exams was what you were meant to do from education. Certainly when I went to school. I've got a device in my pocket, you've got devices there. I can find out what the capital of Kenya is, or when the Meiji Restoration in Japan was, or what the saline content of a particular ocean is in a few seconds with what's in my phone. So is accumulating knowledge really the best use of educating our kids? Emotional intelligence, 100%. I think, the focus we've had on mental health, it's starting to change now, thank God. Still a long way to go, but getting people to deal with their emotions is just something that they don't get any help with whatsoever, especially in schools. You have school counsellors and stuff like that, but the problem already exists by then. And if you are going to be bringing kids up, as I've chosen to do, in this very volatile and changing world, how are we equipping them to deal with that? Because at the moment we're not really doing it. My grandparents' generation who came through the war, their attitude to mental health was, how many times have you heard this said? My uncle or my granddad or whatever was at Dunkirk or fought in wherever in the Second World War, but he never talked about it. That was the focus. Would never talk about it. It was almost swept under this kind of metaphorical rug in the back of your mind. And now we're realising that that's an extremely unhealthy way of dealing with problems. Getting that into the education system is very, very important in my view. And actually teaching kids how to be able to do stuff, which is bringing me back to the coding side of things, really important. We don't teach kids about diet. I didn't find out about what nutrition was until I was in my mid-20s. I knew that, pizza and McDonald's was something you should only eat now and again, but I didn't know why. Personal finance, how to, look after your finances. Taking on debt, why that's a bad idea, why in certain cases borrowing money is a good thing, what you should be doing for your retirement. None of that ever got taught to me at school, but I could tell you the dates of, when monarchs acceded to the throne. I can get that information on my phone. I don't need to learn that at school. Yeah. I don't need my kids or any kids to be learning that at school. You need to equip people, I think, in the schooling system now for what reality is going to throw at you. So yeah, what your man was saying about teaching him to be a good person, which is hugely important. I went to a Catholic school, and you're kind of, the way you were meant to behave, it was very pious, and you're a Catholic, which means that you obey by these rules, and that was a shockingly bad way of teaching people morals. But yeah, like this kind of teaching kids respect, teaching kids to be polite, teaching kids to have empathy. All very important. You learn that from your parents, of course, but I think you need to learn it at school too.
Nah, it's come up, you know, when you talk about mental health, that's come up on the podcast organically from literally day one.
Yeah.
Like we've learned and understood it more and more just sitting and talking to people, and that's the only way anyone's ever going to learn.
Well, I think your generation, to be honest with you, and I hope you don't think I'm patronising when I'm saying that, you young people, but your generation, the millennial generation, and the one that's coming after that are the ones that are affecting the change. And they're affecting change in a lot of other areas as well, but they're very good at being frank and honest about mental health. I don't know the lady's name, but the lady in Little Mix this week who was in the news talking about how she'd got suicidal because of scumbags on the internet being mean about her. Stuff like that is so incredibly helpful. When I was a kid, the only people you heard talking about mental health was musicians or artists, really. So, you know, I was a huge Nirvana fan when I was a kid, and, you know, obviously the singer in that band and the songwriter had terrible mental health problems and problems with addiction, and there was loads of other people like that. But that was it. But now you've got sports people talking about it. I mean, look at what Tyson Fury has done or Ricky Hatton has done. You know, their example is phenomenal. And if you look at people like that, these incredible boxers who like put themselves through hell in the ring and in training, talking about the battle they had in their head, that suddenly every young man in the country who's got an interest in that sport thinks, okay, if it can happen to him, it can happen to me. It's happening with football as well, and it's starting to happen in business as well. I think it was Santander Bank. It's not the person who's there now, but the person who was there before. I can't remember his name, which is really annoying, but boss of Santander, massive bank, billions of pounds, employees all over the world. He was open and honest about his mental health issues. The more that this kind of happens and the more that you kind of create that conversation, show that this is not abnormal behaviour or abnormal health difficulties, I think is the better. I think work is getting better at dealing with it, but, you know, we need to... It's abysmal in the health service. And I don't mean this as being critical of people who work in the health service, but, you know, if I get out of here now and I drive home and I crash my car and I break my arm or I break my leg, they'll be able to deal with that really, really effectively. I crashed my bike about 4 years ago and I walked away with just cuts and bruises. I lost one of my teeth, but they were absolutely awesome. They dealt with me fantastically well. If I've got an eating disorder or somebody has got insert mental health problem here, you're probably going to be on a waiting list for like months because there just isn't the people to deal with it, which is a problem. You had Jodie on, didn't you? Jodie Hill?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, so I know Jodie quite well. I'm doing a conference for her this week actually on mental health in the workplace, and what she's doing is awesome, wanting to get a mental health first aider into the workplace. I'd never heard of this until I heard her talking about it. Really good idea, spotting the signs early and not doing what I think particularly a lot of blokes will do, which is try and solve it. That's what men do. They see a problem and they want to solve it, but, you know, you're not qualified to do that. Someone else is, so refer them to somewhere else. So that's a good start, I think. But yeah, going back to what we were talking about earlier with kind of equipping children with that emotional intelligence, I don't think we've really started on that properly yet, frankly, and I hope that we will do, because it's you know, it'd be a very exciting and interesting world that kids grow up in now, but it will not be as straightforward as I think as it was for possibly someone like me who was born in 1980.
No, me and you had the conversation, didn't we, about about like having kids, and like the more we've done this podcast, the more we've talked, the more we realise that if you don't really have a good understanding of who you are as a person and your morals and how you keep yourself in line in terms of your own mental health or your mental wellness, how could you ever bring up a child in this world knowing that you're not no one's ever complete as a person. I get it. Yeah. Everyone's striving for perfection, and it's not, you know, it's a myth. It's not, it doesn't exist, but it's something that we all aspire. But how could you bring up a child not knowing what you are as a person, what you're about, how to, you know, pass that on? Because you see it all the time. Like I said to you, like I was in traffic and I could see like a kid and his dad, or I presume it's his dad, in the car behind me, and the dad is just ranting at him. Right. And the kid's just like obviously like deadpan, blank face, and I'm like, you just don't realise the influence you have over that kid. Like what you say to him now will just resonate with him for fucking years. Yeah. And it could affect him terribly. It could have your prejudices are passed on to him, and it's crazy. Like, and if you don't realise that, it's kind of dangerous. Like, what kind of?
It's a lot of responsibility. Yeah, that's it. Having a kid.
Crazy, yeah. I don't know. It's just something we've talked about loads, and it's kind of come up to me more and more. Like, the older I get, like, oh, do you want kids? Oh, yeah, probably, but like, I want to know that I'm a good person, or like I'm doing something to kind of shape that and build that and understand it.
When I was getting ready to have my little girl, one of my Graham, the cartoonist at work, shout out to Graham Bandera. He we're in the pub. It was like Christmas time, and he said, "Oh, when's your missus due?" And I said, "Oh, a few weeks." And I said, "Oh, I'm starting to get nervous now." And he said, "Don't get nervous. You'll know what to do. It's instinct." And that was best and probably the only bit of parental advice I got that actually proved to be true, because you do kind of instinctively know, don't let, make sure they eat on time and stuff like that when they're babies. But as she's getting older, you do just have this kind of innate sense of what they should and shouldn't be doing. Yeah, I don't want to get into too much sort of technical aspects of what you're trying to teach her, but some of it's really easy. Other parts of it are very hard, and it definitely will get harder as they get older. So you're talking about that lad in the car. Mm-hmm. When they start to get into the sort of teenage years where they're starting to become adults and start to have their own ideas and will listen to their parents less, that's a tough part of, definitely the hardest part, I think, of bringing up kids will be when they're teenagers.
Yeah. Do you know, we started this podcast because, he was talking about being financially literate, that sort of stuff. It was like, oh, no one will be around to fucking teach us this stuff. No one. Like, literally no one. We set up this podcast off the back of reading the book Think and Grow Rich, in terms of building masterminds, getting around people that can, help you.
Have a similar goal in mind.
Similar goal.
Okay.
And even probably be, transcend you, like help you get to a higher level than you're already at. But then we were like, all right, that's great. I grew up in a fairly rough part of Bradford. You came over to Leeds, you were living in Armley. You can't walk around and find people that are aspirational, doing very well. You can find great people, great stories, but you're all in that same level. Like, how do you progress? I was like, this is the reason why we set up this podcast, is to bring people on to help educate our younger selves by having that conversation.
Right.
But where I'm going with my little bit is, if I was a teenager, I probably won't fucking listen to me now anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you even address young people? It's
kind
of a $1 million question in a way.
I had two really lucky things that happened to me when I was getting brought up when I was a kid, which was I had fantastic parents, but I also had really good mates who were, I grew up in a town called Redcar, which, I'm very proud to be from there. I had a good childhood and all the rest of it. Again, like you guys were saying, pretty tough patch of real estate where opportunities weren't as bountiful as other parts of the country. And I had friends who, like myself, were kind of really aware of that and what we had to do to make sure we did something for ourselves. So that environment for me was great. If I hadn't had that, I don't know what would have happened really, because your friends are more influential on you, aren't you, when you're a teenager than anyone else is. There's no way that you'd ever do anything that made you look like an idiot in front of your friends. That's just the worst thing that can ever happen to you. And it's only when you start to get older that you start to become more independent. So yeah, getting everyone in that sort of headspace is not easy. And that example again you're using of the dad ranting at his kid in the car, you've just got to get a check on yourself, man. You can't do that under any circumstances, no matter how bad a day you're having. Something really interesting I read a couple of years ago, which is on that theme, which has been of huge help for me in my life, is that I can't remember what the example was, but again, okay, so say you're driving along and someone cuts you up, or you cut them up, it's probably a better way of putting it, and you do it by accident, you just weren't paying attention, and they go berserk with you and start screaming and shouting at you. You just think, God, what a dickhead that guy is, what's his problem? And then you don't know what that guy's going through. His wife could be dying, he might have just lost his job. So kind of walking through life, I think, with that constant mindset that person could be having a really tough time, and if they're acting like in a way that you find offensive or that you're not particularly on board with, that's coming from somewhere. They're not just doing it because they're bad people. I mean, some people will be. But all bad people have got some good in them, and all good people have got some bad in them, and everyone does stuff now and again they'd rather than not done.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
One thing I want to ask, with the rise of sort of social media, like we all, like, again, it's come across the podcast, we've kind of said it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So again, we've all, on one side you've got the people getting depressed, the anxiety, that side of it. On the other side is, you're getting young people starting their own business, doing what they want with it, creating income from social media. With social media, what are your thoughts on it, and how have you seen it, I guess, affect people? And in the news over the sort of last 5 years, I'd probably say last 5 to 6 years, there's been a boom in social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so when I started in journalism, but certainly when I was getting brought up, if you had something published, you were either a journalist or you were an author, or maybe you were an academic. You were somebody who was, quote unquote, a person of influence. You were an expert. Sometimes I definitely don't consider myself an expert, but that was kind of the perception if you had your stuff published. The internet's taken all of that away. Anyone can publish anything they want at any stage. I almost say the best thing about the internet is it gives everyone a voice. The worst thing about the internet is it gives everyone a voice. So for my profession, it's a huge, huge problem, but also presents a lot of opportunities. I can reach more people now than I ever could by having something printed in the newspaper in the morning when I started out. In theory, anyone in the world can read whatever I read, but from just looking on their phone or the laptop. So in terms of extending the reach, that's been great. But what it has also meant is there's been a proliferation of, and I don't want to sound like I'm being a snob with this, but news outlets that frankly aren't particularly good. And then you get what is now called, quote unquote, fake news, which is not a new thing. There's been fake news around since there's been news. In the 1640s, I think it was King Charles. He was really worried about anti-monarchist sentiments springing up in coffee shops, because coffee shops were where intellectuals would hang out, and intellectuals would be dangerous to the crown because they often didn't particularly like the sort of totalitarian way he ran the country. So he sent, emissaries out to coffee shops to kind of shut down anything that was against the king. So that's almost like, suppressing news and fake news straight there. That's hundreds of years ago. So it's always been around, but it's now much easier to come across. You can't really police it particularly effectively, and I don't know how. I think the industry's starting to get a bit better at this, but there's almost needs to be an industry standard for news. But at the same time, I don't want to shut down or suppress really cool blogs or podcasts, because to be honest with you, that kind of stuff has put the media on its back heels big time. It used to be the control of the news was centered in the hands of not very many people. Now that's spreading out hugely. So in terms of how it actually manages itself, it's in a very difficult spot, because people are buying less newspapers. Hardly anyone buys magazines anymore. Hardly anyone actually really, to be honest with you, is going directly to source, to NewYorkTimes.com or whatever. They're getting it via social media. And your social media algorithm will only put you in a certain direction based on what you're clicking on. So if you're a particularly left-leaning person or a right-leaning person, the algorithm will push you more towards the right. So you're getting less and less of a plurality or a range of opinion. And that's really, really bad news. Really bad news. If I've got to speak to journalism students, I always say to them, okay, but what newspaper do you read? And most of the time they will say The Guardian. I say, start reading the Daily Mail, because you need to start getting a better range of ideas. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree. I don't agree with 100% of what anyone says, let alone 100% of what any newspaper says. But you need a bigger range of opinions. But if you're kind of getting pushed into this kind of narrow channel, which is what's happened a lot with sort of recent elections, then you're never going to get out of there, and then you get stuck in an echo chamber where everyone's saying the same things. There's a reason why Remain voters don't understand Leave voters, and why Leave voters don't understand Remain voters, because they don't bloody well talk to each other, let alone try and understand their opinions. And that's why there's no compromise potential at the moment, because they're dug into these narrow trenches, and there's nothing to kind of bring them together. And the social media aspect of that has been a huge, huge part of that. And when the referendum was happening, the Leave campaign exploited that incredibly well and very skillfully, and their main camp was completely at sixes and sevens and just didn't know what to do, and they were very smug and arrogant, thinking, "Oh, people will vote to Remain because that's what we're telling them to do, because we're going to tell them it's going to be terrible for the economy." They weren't believing it, they weren't buying it.
Yeah, crazy times. What was that documentary that you told me to watch?
Oh, The Great Hack.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've not watched that yet. Is it good?
It's frightening.
Yeah.
Literally frightening. Because it's like what you said, people can be just driven into small pockets of, this is what I believe, this is what I keep clicking, this is what I want to learn more about, this is the people that I'm now surrounded with socially.
Drives
and it
you
just
to, polarizes you,
just
doesn't it?
affirms whatever opinion you have. I made the stupid saying of like, oh, if you hate brown sofas, you can find a pocket of the internet of people that fucking hate brown sofas. That's all you surround yourself with. And then it's just going to manifest even bigger and stronger, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I get it, because when the vote happened, I'll be honest, and the result came out, I didn't even want to fucking understand why anyone voted to leave. But that's the problem, like people just want to paint someone in a quick picture. And that's the second thing I wanted to ask you. Is it frustrating that people's attention span is getting a little shorter for people like you that invest a lot of time into what you publish, and all people really give a fuck about is Make It Masterminds Punch Dog will get more clicks than Make It Masterminds
talks to poxy business journalists.
Talks to business journalists. Like if we said that you punched Julian in the face, like you punched a black guy in the face, that's going to get way more clicks, right?
Okay, please don't do that.
Nah. Oh, listen to the whole podcast. No one put that out. Punch Julian in the face. Anyway, we know what I'm getting at.
I do know, and
to make it sound so stupid is to make it actually people understand what it actually is. Like, to blow it out of all proportion.
Well, look, people's attention span is short not because they've got a short attention span. It's because life is really bloody hectic at the moment. Almost every household, both parents will work. Some cases they'll be working more than one job. You're travelling for work, you're putting the kids to bed, you're dealing with whatever in the house. Your attention span will automatically get shortened. For me personally, if I didn't have to use social media for work, I don't know if I'd be on it. That's the truth. And I've been on Facebook since it was started, and I've been on Twitter from whenever that came around, and all of that kind of stuff. I'm finding it less and less informative to me, if I'm being honest. I don't read ebooks. I don't even listen to audiobooks. I like reading paper books. I don't get a huge amount of my news from the internet anymore. That's not because I want to kind of read as in depth as I can. But I've had to make lifestyle changes to do that, and I'm a journalist, so I've got every amount of skin in the game you can imagine. For everyone else, the attention span thing is definitely short. But this is why I think podcasts are awesome. And hats off to you guys for doing this. I've got nothing but respect for you doing it. And it's a really good show. But you can listen to it as you're walking around. You can incorporate it into day-to-day life. You can listen to it while you're in the shower, or you're picking out your laundry, or you're out for a run, or you're driving. You can get into things in loads of depth. Really go through things. It's just fantastic. But you don't really get that from a lot of other media, like broadcast media, for example. And this was, again, a good example in the referendum where it just wasn't getting the information across at all. You can't talk about something that's as complex as the cash we pay into the European Union and what we get back in 5 minutes while putting both sides across. You're just not going to be able to do it. It's not effective at all. It's not as bad in Britain. We're very, very lucky to have the BBC, and we've got, really good broadcasters, Sky News and all the rest of it. But you look at in America where they've got those stupid things where they have 8 people in little boxes in different studios all arguing with each other and shouting at each other. It's just a pathetic way of debating issues. So the attention span thing is very frustrating for sure. And I'm not sure that social media is often the best platform for getting your news from, because as I say, you're not really giving it your full attention. But be perfectly frank, and that's where the vast majority of my stories get read, and all of our stories get read is through that channel. That's how people want to do it now. So the question, throwing it back on myself then in my industry, how do we make sure that people's attention span improves? That's on us to do. It's not their fault that they've got these incredibly busy lives and this is how they're choosing to get the news. That's the reality, and we have to deal with it. So stuff we're kind of looking at the moment is, how do we do that? How do we make the longer reads more accessible? Do we publish at a time when we think people will be more able to get engaged and have more free time? Because, a newspaper gets published first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning for me is absolute mayhem, school run and all the rest of it. That's the evolution of the industry. And as I say, that's on us. We should take full responsibility for that. We can't go blaming people because they're not treating your product. Journalism is a business at the end of the day. They're not treating your product in the way that's convenient for you.
So how would you, if it was your call, how do you address it? How
mine's really simplistic. I just sort of mandate that everyone has to have at least 45 minutes every day where they do nothing but read, but I don't think I'd have much success with that. Oh God, if I had the answer to that, mate, then I'd be
You'd be the Prime Minister.
I would be the Prime Minister. I would have an incredibly successful and the most ethical media company that ever existed. Yeah. Look, we need to be reaching for the highest point of the mountain that we can get on, and so I do think it's keeping the sort of ethical standards, the commitment to accuracy, but doing it in a way that people want to read it. Not doing the article of like, this is where Drake is playing on tour, so you've got to click it to find out if he's playing near you or something like that. That side of things, I think it cheapens news. I think it cheapens the message, and it cheapens the information, and worse than anything, it cheapens the issue. That's why you've got distrust in politics, or why there's perhaps a real distrust of, say, big corporations or banks or certain industries. Because we're not getting the good side of it across in a particularly effective way. So, big challenge. But I do think podcasts are a real salvation for it, though. I really do. I've learnt more. I'm really late to the podcast part. I only started listening to them a couple of years ago, but I've probably learnt more from listening to podcasts than I've learnt from a lot of things recently. And not just from listening to the podcast, but what it's turned me on to. The amount of flipping amazing books I've read off of hearing them mentioned, either the author themselves being interviewed or someone even just referencing it. That sounds interesting. Getting hold of the copy has been phenomenal. And that's been really, really important for me. And I do think you'll see more and more of this kind of stuff, really.
Yeah. All right. I've got something that's more about you now, because you've given us a lot of your opinions and that sort of stuff. So you're saying work's hectic, life's hectic for everyone. You've got a hectic job. How do you actually switch off? How do you cut that constant
Work
information, and then how do you take a break? How do you switch off? How do you take care of yourself?
I'm really bad at doing it. Well, I mean, one really good way that I have is again, I was lucky that I got interested in exercise early in life. So, again, like all kids, I played football, but in my early 20s, I got really into distance running and did a lot of half marathons and a couple of marathons. So that is a great way to switch off, because you're out, headphones on, music on, not thinking about anything other than, just completing the distance. We're talking about boxing earlier on. Ridiculously, I took up boxing at the age of 31.
Alright, how did that go?
I never had a fight or anything like that. Like, I sparred and stuff like that, and like learnt combinations and footwork and all the rest of it. But I absolutely loved doing that. It was fantastic. It was a great. You go from sort of running marathons and thinking you're super fit, and then I remember going to my first boxing class with Al, who we were talking about before, who trains Jermaine and loads of other great fighters, and going in and coming out of there and just. I think I remember struggling to open my car or get out of my car, because it's a totally different kind of fitness, of course. I go to yoga at least once a week. I wish I could go more. I'm really into cycling. I've started doing triathlon. All of those things really, really help me. They're for my own well-being, they're extremely important, and I've really kind of put a real concerted effort in. Like, I cycle to work most days. Getting out for a run, going to yoga. I've got like a little gym set up in my garage with like a weights bench and stuff like that. All of that's dead important to me. And like, I'm not particularly interested in being, like, I'm doing a triathlon in a couple of weeks. I want to beat my previous time, but I won't be devastated if I don't. It's more the actual action of doing it. Competing, not so important to me now. As I say, I'm 40 next year. I'm not going to be breaking any records. That's really important to me. And then, I mentioned music earlier on. I kind of treat music almost like a meditation, or as part of, I hear people talking who are really religious, about how they read the whatever particular religious text it is that's the core part of their religion. I kind of treat music like that, to be honest with you. Like, you know, there is records which are like gospel to me that kind of really help me deal with life. And then, you know, I've got a fantastic family. I've got an amazing wife, a beautiful little girl, another one due at the end of the year. Spending time with them is absolutely phenomenal part of my life and helps me switch off from the world. My wife is also a journalist, so it's not always terribly easy. But at the same time, I don't know if I could be married to someone who isn't a journalist, who doesn't understand, you know, I'm going to be back at work at 1 a.m. again. So yeah, all of those kind of factors really, really help me. And I also try as much as I can do to try and... One thing that's always been really a big passion of mine is learning. Whether that's learning how to do yoga or boxing, or like I had to learn to swim this year so I could do a triathlon, which was a bloody ridiculous thing to do at the age of 38. But yeah, like reading as much as I can, listening to podcasts, you know, trying to get that range of opinion. All of those things kind of really help me. The one thing that I definitely need to work on, in sort of spirit of being frank, is my sleep is terrible. You know, I need to sleep a lot more and I need to sleep better.
Yeah.
I read a terrifying book, it's exactly a year ago, I read this by Matthew Walker. Have you come across him? The Why We Sleep? Oh my God.
You just passed that on to me.
Oh mate, that book.
Sleep 6 to 8 hours, everyone, or you're going to fucking die.
No, it's 7 hours minimum. 7 hours minimum. Like, I'm lucky, if I have 7 hours sleep, that's a big night's sleep for me. Like, I don't know, I just find it very difficult to switch off and fall asleep quickly. But that book absolutely scared the shit out of me, because I think I spend all of this time exercising and eating a good diet and all of this, but you know, I might as well be smoking 20 fags a day the amount I sleep. You know, it's all these things I'm putting myself at risk from. So yeah, I need to work at that. I don't know what I'm going to do. Somebody told me that meditating helps. I've downloaded the Headspace app and it's been on the phone for like a month and a half and I've not done anything with it.
We've both used it for.
Does it work?
It's good.
Yeah, it helps.
I need to give it a go. I need to do something, because that's the one aspect of my life which is not healthy at all, is sleep. I just don't get a good quality of sleep at all, and I think that would kind of probably make my life a lot better. So yeah, in terms of switching off, I'm lucky that I've managed to find a few avenues in my life that have really helped for that. So yeah, good family and keeping active and keeping busy help you switch off, which is really good. And do you know what, man, we were talking about boxing earlier on. It's a bit like playing five-a-side football or football in general. You don't think about anything else at all whatsoever other than what you're doing when you're in that moment. And that's a really healthy thing, I think, for your mind. Yeah. Yoga's kind of like that as well, which, you know, it's obviously a lot less physically intensive, and you've not got the realistic danger of having your jaw broken. But, you know, you do kind of... I think focusing intently on tasks is quite therapeutic in terms of relaxing. Yeah. No, that's why people build, you know, they do DIY and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, yeah. It's very
especially
helpful.
In this day and age now, where we've got so many distractions and phone, there's 100 different notifications on your phone.
Well, that's it. I was just about to say that. How many times we say it all the time, don't we? How many times do people sit down and have a conversation like this?
Yeah.
Ever. Like, I'm not picked up my phone, not even wanting to pick up my phone, not think about anything else, just like actually listening to someone else, take it in.
It's getting a bit rarer and rarer, isn't it?
It's so rare.
When I went on holiday this year, I didn't go on the internet for 2 whole weeks.
How did it feel? Good or bad?
It was really, really hard. It really kind of hammered home how addicted we are to those things. So it got to the point where, like, I've got Spotify on my phone, so if I wanted to like be at the pool and listen to music, I had to have it on me. But I started to actually start leaving it in the room, and I'd always be doing this, because I always have my phone in this pocket, and it wouldn't be there, and I'd be like, oh, it's up in the room, I need the... But it did make
that.
Everyone's like that, totally, 100%. And you know, you look around in life, and people are constantly on their phone. I'm a big believer that it's kind of pointless. You know, it is just a series of distractions, and you're kind of looking at stuff that sometimes, and I'm as guilty of this for anyone, you know, flicking through Instagram and watching, you know, whoever it might be, you know, the latest boxer who's got a fight coming up, post footage of him training or something like that. I don't need to see that. No. What's that bringing to my... It's not like I'm going to skip like that next time I go to the gym or something. But I still watch it. I still watch it. Or like, you know, bands, you know, putting up 30-second clip of them playing a gig. Who wants to watch 30 seconds of live music? But I'm sitting there, you know, when I should be going to sleep watching it. Right. Yeah, it is. Look, I mean, it's a very powerful thing. You know, I keep talking about when I was a kid, but being really into music, CDs were really bloody expensive. They were like 15 quid. So that was like a Saturday's worth of working for me to buy a CD. You could tape stuff off of your mates and stuff like that. Now I can listen to any song I want in pretty much recorded history at the touch of a button. You can watch any film, all the stuff that's on YouTube, all the stuff that's been uploaded there, you name it. It's all in there. So it's an incredibly powerful and empowering thing that you have access to all of this stuff. But at the same time, it is, putting the lid on that bottle, or the lid on the bottle. The one with the genie in it. Yeah, terrible metaphor. Sorry, it's been a long day. But it's a tough thing for anyone to do. There's a lot in that phone. There's a lot of information there.
But at the end of the day, we kind of talk about phones like they do that. But you download the app, you follow the certain people, and people kind of don't. We kind of pass it off and blame technology, but we should fucking blame ourselves, really.
Oh yeah, I mean that technology wouldn't exist if it didn't have a customer.
No,
wouldn't have a customer at all. And there's a reason why the social media companies have such massive reach. Mm-hmm. They're given something that's pretty good, frankly. I don't go on Facebook a lot, but I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm on Twitter constantly, and it's really helpful for me to spread, put stories out there, and you get some good opinion back and forth and all the rest of it. But, now and again, you'll get some pretty vicious trolling, and you're like, what's going on here? Why are you doing that?
What, even yourself?
Yeah, I've had it a bunch of times. I mean, you learn the ropes quickly, don't you? I won't engage with anyone who hasn't got a picture of themselves and it's demonstrably their own name. That you're identifiable as being a particular person. Otherwise, I'm just not going to bother, because if you've not got the conviction or the bravery or the confidence in what you're saying to put your name and your face to it, then I'm just not interested. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and stuff that really people shouldn't be getting that angry about, like HS2 really gets people angry. Brexit really gets people angry. And I've not taken a particular position once on Brexit, really. I've always been, since the referendum happened, I wanted to be because we didn't take a stance at the Yorkshire Post. We decided we weren't going to do that because everyone was telling everyone what to do and thinking they had the right and they should be telling people how they should vote. And we decided we weren't going to do that. We're going to let people make their own minds up. And I've kind of tried to adhere to that myself as a journalist. Again, trying to sort of bridge that gap and come up with something that pleases everybody. But even now, I can remember one day getting messages on. I think I got one message on Twitter and one email. One of them called me all the usual sort of stupid words that are now attached to this debate, like Ramona and you can't accept the result of the debate. And on the same day, about the same article, I got somebody saying you're in hoc with UKIP and you were desperate to leave the EU. So I was like, well, I must have been fair if I've got those two responses to the same piece. But yeah, that's that. Talk about stuff that you worry about for kids. That's one that really worries me. Is this the tidal wave of abuse that can quite quickly come your way online is just unbelievable. At least when I was at school, you went home at the end of the day and you were safe, and you're not now because people are messaging you on the phone and what have you.
Mm.
Yeah,
that's
true.
One thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, and we've kind of talked about it already, was sort of Facebook, the information age that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Big data being out there, these companies, there's talks about big data is becoming as valuable as sort of
the new oil,
the new oil out there. What do you think the dangers in that are? And there's talks about us moving towards being a cashless society.
Yeah.
Do you see any dangers or difficulties or roadblocks that might be in that, moving towards being a cashless society in the future and towards big data having all our information the way they are using that information?
It's a really interesting point, and it's a revolution that happened extraordinarily quickly. It used to be like protecting your personal information was something you defend very, very vigorously, and it was a huge political issue. The government should never interfere in trying to get hold of your details or your information. If you lost your family photo album a few years ago, it would be a disaster. Who's got my photos? And now people will put pictures of their children on Facebook like there's no tomorrow and let anyone look at it. That has just switched overnight. It's like night and day. People will happily put all of that stuff out there. That thing that pops up on every bloody website you go on saying, do you agree to accept cookies and all the rest of it? Everyone clicks yes. No one ever says no. You'll sign up to mailing lists and all of this, and you'll get thousands of emails every week that you don't read. So we've kind of gone into this voluntarily, perhaps quite naively. So that's the sort of big data side of things. The cash side of things. Well, I mean, money is controlled centrally to a certain degree anyway, because you'll always have a sort of central bank, and you'll always have the clearing banks and the current accounts and stuff like that. That's where your money kind of comes from. It not existing in a physical form doesn't concern me a huge amount. What does concern me is I don't worry about it getting sort of stolen from individuals. I worry about
big corporations.
Not so much big corporations. I worry about bad actors, and this doesn't necessarily even need to be governments, but I worry about how currencies get manipulated in terms of increasing or decreasing their value, which could be done with the right sort of bad presence on the internet. So I think we will get increasingly cashless. I think at some point they're going to realise it's just not an effective use of resource to print all of this money every year. Coins, I mean, it's this ridiculous situation now where it's more money to mint a 2p or a 1p coin than they're actually worth, because copper's so valuable at the moment. There will be, there is still a hardcore of people, and there's people in my life, most of them are younger than me as well, who just will not do internet banking at all. But I pay for pretty much everything cashlessly now. I don't give it a huge amount of consideration, but yeah, I don't worry about it too much. And it's also happening in business at large, stuff like blockchain, where you can sort of track transaction to transaction very definitively. Again, talk about automation, that's got rid of a hell of a lot of jobs. I don't worry about it too much. The information side of things I do worry about a great deal, because it's so easy to get hold of. Like I'm trying to think how I told this story. Okay, yeah, it's pretty. So I spoke to somebody very senior at a very, very big accounting firm, and he told me about, they've got a unit that basically tries to sort of test the security of institutions to see how easily they can get hacked. And they got these hotshot hackers, and it was a sports stadium somewhere in Europe. That's all he would tell me. So it could be pretty much anywhere. And within the course of a day, they were able to take control of the gates, so they could manually unlock and lock the gates, took control of the scoreboard, took control of the lights, and took control of their social media platforms.
Jeez.
So if you think about a football match that's got thousands and thousands of people there, and you're able to lock them in, shut off the lights, and put out stuff that's going on their Facebook page, it's pretty damn scary. Yeah. So if you can do that for a football stadium, can you do it for what's in an individual's bank account? Almost certainly, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. You could equally, you could break into someone's house and steal all the money that's under the bed. There's always going to be risks. I think financial crime, it's not as bad as I think a lot of people would have feared when we started moving into this more kind of digital infrastructure for moving money around. It used to be, but I first started working, I used to get money in a plastic bag with a little pay slip in there. Just gets paid straight into the account. Now that happened, people were really worried about that, and nothing happened that was particularly bad with it. You can apply for loans on the internet now and get them pretty quickly, sometimes for quite a lot of money. That's probably not as good a side of things. I don't know, credit scoring based on just what you type into the internet is a bit of a flimsy way of doing it, I reckon.
Yeah. Definitely. Maybe we wouldn't buy crazy cars and stuff if someone gave you 25,000 in cash and you had to go pay it in cash. You'd be like, maybe
you suddenly start looking at that money. Yeah. No, that's a good point though. You look at it and think that's a lot of money I'm about to give it.
Kind of devalues the actual physical.
That's true.
That's what true. Money actually is. When you were asking a question though, did you mean like how people use big data? Money is digital online. Are people going to be kind of funnel towards spending more money without really realizing?
Well, that's it. That's a side of it as well. Like exactly that.
The data is going to understand people's habits better than they do. Because I've read books about habits and I don't know fuck all about my own habits. But these people are going to learn them very, very fast. Well, not people, but algorithms are going to understand people way faster.
What you're clicking on those cookies.
What you're clicking on, why you're clicking on like this. And if you just got to pay with your phone, which is already next to your phone, are people going to buy stuff they never really want? Because we're in like a very, very, very consumer-driven market now. It's like women can, or like girls can buy outfits from like websites for like £10 for an outfit for a night, that they just throw it away.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's mental. So do you think that's going to be
drive that? That reminds me of a very, very funny line in one of Chris Rock's specials where he said that no one has ever taken money out of an ATM after 3 o'clock in the morning for a good reason. I think if you're shopping late at night, you shouldn't be on eBay or Amazon after a certain time of night, because your decision making, you're going to be tired, you're going to be buying stuff that you don't need. But you're right, it's like literally your thumbprint and you're there. I mean, it's kind of happening already 100%, isn't it? I mean, when I go on my Instagram, it's actually been quite depressing for me. It's shown how boring I am. It like recommends cycling parts and stuff like that. It doesn't recommend anything.
It knows you pretty well.
But it definitely knows me. But it knows what I've been looking at. So I mean, look, that's happening already. But at the same time, not that long ago, again, and it's still happening now, of course, but, the adverts that you see at, half-time in a football match or in the middle of the X Factor, they're not there by accident. People have obviously paid for them, but they've thought, the people that buy our products watch this programme, so we're going to go in there. So the advertising industry and the sort of commercialisation of people's habits, not a new thing by any stretch. It's been going on probably for about, I would say, 80 years. Very seriously since the sort of end of the Second World War, where the sort of big advertising agencies started to become more sophisticated and do market research and all the rest of it. And companies basing themselves around. McDonald's is an excellent example. That was an unheard of change in the way people dined. You take a drive-in restaurant model, and instead of sitting in your car and having the food brought to you, and you wait for 20 minutes for it to come, or you sit in a restaurant and wait for it to come. They just give it to you straight away. Fast food invented. That was a huge step forward, and now it's rampant everywhere. And you can't go anywhere now without seeing takeaways all over the shop. So I think it is an evolution of something that has already been there previously. I mean, you can't take away individuals' rights to buy stuff. But it does start to get concerning, I guess, if you are marketing stuff to people that you think they've got a decent chance that they can't afford this. Like buying a 10 quid dress off of Amazon off of ASOS or whatever, and throwing it away once isn't a particularly smart thing to do, but it's not going to send you into the poorhouse. Taking out a loan for $5,000, which you're able to do from just a few clicks on the internet, maybe not a good thing. So I'm not a huge believer in kind of restricting individuals' rights as anything really, but particularly when it comes to what they decide to do with the money. But again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, teaching kids about their own personal finances at school, that financial literacy side of things, I think is probably, it is unquestionably extremely important. Understanding, and I wouldn't claim to be a particularly amazing person managing my own finances, but it's simple. You can't spend more than comes in, and it is very easy for people to do that now. It's not just young people; it's everyone. You get an overdraft, no bother. You get a credit card, no bother. Getting a credit card once used to be a really difficult thing.
Get letters for them all the time.
Yeah.
Get one every week if you want.
It used to be if you wanted to get a credit card, probably this stopped happening in maybe the middle of the 80s, but if you wanted to get a credit card, you had to go into a bank and ask for one and get vetted for it. But yeah, you get letters all the time, or they fall out of magazines or newspapers. Yeah. Really straightforward to get hold of.
Do you know what you're talking about? Freedom of decision, and I'm not going to go into it here because I would just say, go watch The Great Hack and let us know what you think about it, and see if it does blur the lines of if you're actually making your own decisions when it comes to how stuff's actually kind of falling at your eyes now on social media, because it kind of scared me.
There's I think he's a neuroscientist by trade. He's called Sam Harris, an American guy, and he says that people don't have free will. They don't make their own decisions. It's all kind of based on their environmental experiences, and that's what makes them do what they do. And that there's very few people that actually do have genuine free will. Most people are just basically doing how they're directed to do, which is very interesting. So I would definitely check that out, mate. Yeah, it sounds right up my street. Yeah. Sort of things that should be dystopia but are actually day-to-day reality.
Yeah, it's kind of sobering in a way. It's kind of scary, and then it's kind of amazing.
Kind of interesting as well.
Like we actually probably humans probably give themselves more credit than we really deserve in terms of things like that, because we kind of just paint stuff as a story. We don't paint it as fact. We don't look at the numbers. We just look at we're going how I feel. Do you know? It's like sat navs at first. Like people only started listening to sat navs because I know the sat nav's telling me to turn right. Like, how many times your parents say that? Like, my mum's the worst for it. Like, my sat nav's telling me to turn right, but I know I've got to go left. And then you turn left and you sit in a fucking traffic jam, and then next time you're like, yeah, I'll listen to the sat nav. It knows better than I do, and then
takes away skills, doesn't it?
Suddenly you just trust it. You just trust technology because it's good.
Yeah.
But you kind of take it away from yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, being able to do it, right?
Yeah.
That's automation of your day-to-day life right there. You don't need to remember how to, drive to wherever. You just type it. Like I came here, typed it into my phone, it told me. But I've started doing it for long journeys, even that I've done 100 times, because it'll tell me if there's traffic coming up. So that's kind of good. But like, it's meaning that I'm forgetting how to get places. Like, talk about Redcar where I grew up. I hadn't been back for ages. My mum and dad don't live there anymore, and most of my friends have moved away. But I took my little girl to watch Middlesbrough play, which I can only apologise to her for that because we got beat 1-0.
Call social services.
Yeah, I know it's a very cruel thing to do to a 5-year-old. But I went just to show the house that I grew up in and what have you, and I started to put it into. I was like, what the bloody hell am I doing? Like I've lived here for 18 years. I know where my mum and dad's house is, and like drove there. But it's just again that instinctive thing. I must rely on technology to help me get through life, and putting the phone away is, I think, something we're going to probably start to see more and more people trying to do. It is a great thing. It gives you a lot, talk about the sort of access to music and all this information. Fantastic. But I really like being outside, and like if I go to the park with my little girl, I don't take my phone. Don't need it. Why would I need it? It's brilliant, and you're kind of really emotionally invested, and all of your attention's on this. Short attention span comes from not paying attention to stuff. It's a crazy time that we live in, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, and just even for us, like to get so many different. We just get every kind of different opinion on everything.
That's good.
Social media, even trolls. Like the funniest thing is when fighters come on here, like really well-known fighters, and people are just giving them shit.
I know.
Talking shit to them. Like, it was the most notable one was Matt Casey, because when you sit this in front of you, you're like, fuck me, he will just break you. Like we say all the time, don't we? Like never swear at anyone in traffic, because someone like Matt Casey could be driving that car. You get out, give him the big one. You're getting armbarred in the middle of the street, or you're getting your chin will be kicked off your head. Something terrible is going to happen. So just chill out. But people's reality of like, oh, I can just say this guy's a dickhead now.
Because of the anonymity of social media?
It's crazy. Like it's just breathing.
Again, giving everyone a voice. It has such terrible, and that's another thing I think is dead important for teaching. Maybe not so much kids, because I think they'll be smart enough to realise this. But there was a terrible example, again going back into journalism, of a guy. He was up in the northeast, and let me get this right. He was a Newcastle United fan. And when he was a kid, like when he was at school, he put some stuff on his Facebook where he used very uncomplimentary language to describe Sunderland fans. I won't repeat it because it's very vulgar. Anyway, he grows up, he goes to university or whatever, and then he qualifies as a journalist and he gets a job covering Sunderland Football Club. Now, most people, that cover football they will support a team, but that won't factor into how they do it because they're professionals. Anyway, someone at the club got wind of these posts, and that was it for him. He had to go.
Done. Yeah.
So the point I'm making is that, and again, if I talk to journalism students or anyone, if you put something on the internet, on your Twitter or your Facebook or whatever, you've got to be able to answer for that within seconds. Again, talk about where you grew up. The town I grew up in, if you chatted shit about somebody and it was a small town, it would more than likely get back to them. So if you just wouldn't do it, because there was, you were going to probably have to face up to some pretty real physical consequences for that.
Yeah.
That has to get applied to the internet as well, but you have this cloak of anonymity that you can bring in. So you get these, sad losers thinking, I can have a go at this really, really tough guy who's awesome at fighting and has all these amazing skills and is incredibly strong, and get away with it. I've got one over on him.
Yeah, I'd feel bad for anyone that really did that. Deontay Wilder, there's a video of Deontay Wilder in there online, and
going through
an internet troll actually comes to the gym, like he's like, it ends up going there and fighting him.
Really? Is this recent?
No, it's
back in the day.
He was a pro boxer.
Right.
Someone's giving him shit, saying something about his daughter who's lives with like a medical condition or something.
Yeah, she's got is it spina bifida? That's why he became a boxer, isn't it?
Bifida, yeah, exactly.
That's why he became a boxer, isn't it? Because he couldn't go to university and study football.
I sent him messages or voice notes or something. Ended up arranging it. Yeah, just go and watch it.
I'm assuming Wilder won.
It's terrible to watch. This guy's not a fighter at all. Like,
I don't know what's wrong with people.
What was he doing?
He's got a death wish. He's a death wish.
Where's he from again? Is it Arkansas or Alabama?
Alabama,
Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. People are. Do you know what? Just watch people and look out for each other. And
well, again, talking about putting people off of politics. You look at the abuse politicians get now. No one's going to want to do it. You're going to end up having rubbish or incredibly thick-skinned, I guess, politicians. You're going to put good people off going into that profession because they don't want to deal with the abuse.
Yeah.
We had an MP assassinated a few years ago in this part of the world. It's, what you were talking about, your man who you had on previously about teaching your kids to be good people, it's so important, and that's got to apply to everything. Being a twat to somebody on the internet doesn't benefit you in any way, shape or form. You're not getting something. You're not winning an argument.
Well, that's it. Do you know what? People, unfortunately, will sit around sometimes and think that because they watch the world from only one perspective all the time, they think that is the centre of the world.
Yeah.
And it's kind of dangerous.
Well, and that's one of the huge, if you have the ability and the opportunity to travel, then you should almost take that, especially when you're young, because that was huge for me growing up, was that. Going to different countries and meeting different people was absolutely massive. To be honest with you, I probably got more out of going to university from that than I actually did from studying, was just meeting people from different parts of the country and different backgrounds. I met a lot of people who went to, really, really good quality public schools, and they were absolutely great people. So that kind of poshers from down south got swept away straight away.
Yeah.
I think the more you can find out about the world, the better. Full stop.
Do you know what I found with the podcast more so a little bit with work is that everyone's actual story is different, but everyone's kind of fundamentals of what they're dealing with, what they're struggling with, like it kind of all happens to everyone at some point. Like bad shit happens to a lot of people all the time. Yeah. It's just everyone's path and the time it happens and how they get there and how they started is different, but under it all, people struggle with the same stuff. People get nervous. World Championship boxer, whatever, they get nervous. Fighter gets nervous. Someone's just started up their own company, they get nervous. Guy who works in Morrison's gets nervous. Everyone gets nervous. It's just a thing.
I remember one of the most amazing things. So when I was started to watch boxing when I was a little boy was when the sort of Tyson in his prime, and he was like just solidly fierce, the most terrifying fight you can imagine. And then I found out later on that the reason he used to fight like that, he said, was because he'd get in the ring and he'd be so nervous and so angry that he'd got himself in the situation where all of these people want him to fight this guy and he doesn't want to get hurt, and that would just kind of swell up into this rage, and that's why he was such like a front-footed on the going for them straight away from the opening bell. You watch all of his early fights, the bell goes ding and he literally runs at the guy. So yeah, you're right. People do. There's no such thing as a perfect person or someone who deals with the world perfectly. There never will be.
No.
Yeah. So understanding everyone's motivation and trying to understand it would make the world a lot better place.
Yeah, sometimes it's just fucking shut up and listen for a bit. If someone's talking and they've got an opinion, just fucking listen, and if you don't understand it, just ask out of curiosity.
That's it, I think there's always something to learn if you're willing to listen.
Exactly.
One of the people I'd most like to interview in the world is Akala, the rapper.
Yeah.
His social commentary, I read his book when I was on holiday, which blew my mind, but I'd really love to interview him because I think I'd learned a lot from him. But one of the things I like about him the most is you'll see him on Question Time or whatever, and someone will bring up like the customs union, for example, and he'll say, I don't know enough about that. And he won't give his opinion. Everyone else who know nothing about the customs union as well, even politicians, they're giving it loads and they have all these fantastic things to say that make them sound, but I don't know enough about it. I'll go and look if you want, and I'll come back with my opinion, but I don't know. Imagine if we had that kind of a situation. And you know what, that's actually quite a positive thing that comes from being a journalist, is I'll often have to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you just said. I say the words over and over again, and people who sit near me must be pissed off and be saying this at some point. Forgive my ignorance, but what does that mean? because I can't just let that slide. I can't just kind of pretend I know what they're talking about. I need to have some sort of handle on it. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with not knowing something. And I can't remember, I think it's Socrates that said that the truly wise man realises how little he knows. I'm probably butchering that quote. If anyone's a philosophy student, I really apologise who's listening to that.
It's pretty accurate that it's, you know, it's exactly that. Like, you really all you know is what you don't know. Like, assume that you don't really know anything. Don't assume that you know everything. It's so dangerous. Like, I used to be a proper fucking know-it-all. Like, and it really moved me when I started the podcast a little bit. And then it's kind of like broadened my mind in a way that's just ridiculous, to sit and talk to different people.
And having the willingness to change your mind as well, which very few people do now. I think as I've got older, I've started to change my mind on things, and that's been a very humbling experience. Definitely makes you a better person.
Well, yeah, not to go too deep in it, but like, kind of, if you tie yourself to something in some way, like, oh, I voted to Remain. If I tie myself to that forever, I'm never going to listen to any other perspective. And the longer I'm entrenched in that, it's just going to compound into more of the same behaviours and patterns, listening to the same thing. And it's so dangerous. Like, the beauty of being human is that tomorrow you can change. You could say, I want to be a pro boxer tomorrow. You can do it. You can change and do whatever the fuck you want tomorrow if you really want. Like, you're not actually tied to anything.
We've got amazing opportunities in this world, not just in this country, but there's so many things that you can get into. And starting to do that starting to do triathlon for me this year has been huge. Really enjoyed that. It gives you a lot of sort of personal satisfaction and that sort of sense of reward of finishing and all the rest of it. Trying something new and learning something new is absolutely brilliant. Really, really good thing. And there's so many things you can do. It doesn't have to be, something that's a physical endeavour. It could be learning to paint or something like that, or a new language.
Yeah, why not?
And you can do and that's another thing that technology has brought us, is you don't need to go to night school and pay for classes. You could probably learn how to speak Mandarin relatively well from something that's on YouTube.
Yeah. I've
got a friend who's an absolutely fantastic landscape photographer. He's self-taught from YouTube. And now he has a YouTube channel teaching people how to do it.
Nice. There you go. That's it. How do you learn how to do all this stuff?
on YouTube, yeah.
YouTube. That's it. We just do it. Do you know what it is? Just start. Don't worry about being shit at it. We're really shit at it. We're still kind of shit at it sometimes. But you just get better by doing. Experience is the biggest thing. Like, people don't realise. Like, go and just try it. Crack on and have a bit of humility. Don't worry if you fuck it up. It's not. No one cares. No one really cares. Big
thing in business, isn't it? And it's probably one of the reasons that we're not an especially entrepreneurial country in terms of like our modern history, because that kind of willingness to have a go at something and fail is not a big deal here, is it? But in the States, I can't remember what the stat is, but like for every sort of successful business owner, they had 2 ones that failed before the third one worked. Yeah.
Well, it's been a big podcast. If people want to find you, they want to go find your page, if you've got any social medias, where can they go?
So the main one, I guess, is my Twitter. It doesn't have a fancy name, it's just my name, so it's @Casci. That's probably the easiest one. I do have other ones, like I'm on Instagram, but it's private, so no one's getting on there. But Twitter is definitely the best way to get me. You can read me in the Yorkshire Post most days, in print and online. And if you Google my name, you'll find me pretty easily.
Nice.
Before we sign off, I've got something for you too.
Nice.
I know you're both big boxing fans, and I've almost really enjoyed this book. About one of the best eras of boxing, the Four Kings book. So it's 70s and 80s. So it's Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvin Hagler, and Tommy Hearns.
Nice.
Sort of goes through the sort of period that they boxed in, and the fights and how they all got made and their backgrounds and stuff like that. So
appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you for
the podcast. Back in here, yeah, nice. Appreciate that.
No worries.
We're done.